Hello everyone, welcome back to the KMTRADERS channel. So this is the full market analysis volume 128. So we're going to look at the what's going to come up for next week and compare our analysis from last week as well. So pretty much we've got the annotations left on from the prior week. So we'll start the analysis off with gold. So if we look at what's been happening on last week, pretty much very choppy price action behavior. Again, nothing too crazy this week. Possibly because we were coming, well, this week we're coming to the end of the month, so possibly we could expect some sharp moves this week. So literally we've not really been moving too much, really just consolidated quite a lot here. So what I'm seeing here is just the possible build up for price to just drop lower, or we'll get that rally between rejecting 1800, and so we could have this rally that comes up. So this is the bullish scenario. The other one that I'm looking at is the idea of a sell-off, and that's if we break the 1760 level. So if we break this, we're probably going to be looking at some bearish ideas, but once that happens, I'll have to rethink everything and pretty much look at the analysis again. But this is the kind of route that I'm following. It's pretty much been this ideology for the past few weeks now. So if you have been following along, you kind of already understand what I'm looking at. So with EU, where was we? 20th. So pretty much we ended the previous week, 2 weeks ago, with this spike, and then we've just been chopping along nicely. So two scenarios that we're looking at is pretty much this scenario of a sell-off, and then the rally respecting the 1.04 level and bouncing up, or we get price to sell off immediately, and potentially take out 1.03, head lower, and then expect their rally up. But these two scenarios I'm keeping in the back in my mind, just watching out for this low, or these levels to hit. Could probably get rid of this level right now, but really that's what I'm looking at. And we're pretty much trying to look for some bullish scenarios. Like as we can see, we've had that huge step up in price, so it could give us a possibility of price dropping lower, and then we can review if it's gonna, or we just need to wait for a little spike in price. But NFP is, I believe, this week. Let me quickly check. So should have checked prior-wise, but yeah. So if I just quickly check on my calendar, I believe it is okay. So it's not this week. So we're looking at NFP on the 8th of July. Okay, interesting. And okay, so it might not be too busy this week, but there are a few events that you just need to be mindful of anyway. But yeah, nonetheless, let's move on now to NZD/USD. So what I was basically trying to explain, that the NFP could be the leading cause to develop the bullish scenario, just throwing it out there. Obviously we've got other meetings and other news events that could creep in as well. So to me, NFP probably could be the kind of initiator, but again, that's already like 2 weeks away, so we don't really need to discuss that right now. But just keep planning along the scenarios of what each week, and it'll kind of make sense as we go along. So if you look at NZD/USD, pretty much looking out for this, again, a nice little drop before we get some sort of rally to 0.625. So we're still building within this range. Then we have the other option where we get the sell, and this could end up pushing lower. So we had a sell, or midway, not necessarily pushing into 0.64, but regardless of that, we had pretty much a sell, or beginning the sell. So whether or not we end into 0.61 or 0.60. That's all to play for really, so we could go either way. But sales could be on the cards, taking it to the downside, and then we could look for some upside moves. Again, we're not really too sure, but we just need to wait for this momentum to kick in bullish wise. We should be okay. So with AU, so here 20, so saw this dropping off, so you could argue this scenario and potentially this scenario as well, so I guess they were kind of accurate in what I was saying. So if we were to look at this week, what we could look at is price doing something like this now, which is already started to do like a little kick-off in price, pushing higher. So we could get a tinier, a smaller pullback before it pushes up. Or another scenario is we get price to, it may pop up just a little bit more and then just sell off temporarily, to potentially head into 0.68 and 0.67 just to test those levels. Again, this could still drop off like quite a lot, but we don't really necessarily know too much. But this could give us a scenario where we could expect price to push higher. So again, I'm looking at this all being taken out if we do get a bullish scenario, so kind of look into that. So if we take a look now into the Japanese yen, so what we was looking at here, so 20th, so I was looking for pretty much an upside move to potentially tap into 136, even 137. So we ended up 136 rejecting, so seeing this sell off. So now it's going to be interesting to see, are we going to see this like completely melt off, or are we going to see price make a way back up to the upside, which is going to be a bit of a yo-yo effect. But what we're going to anticipate is something like this. So we'll either get one scenario where we'll go back up. So if it goes back up, it might need to drop a little bit deeper. So let's just say price comes down and then up. So maybe something like this. Let me just draw it all again. Just making this much more complicated than needed, but basically I'm just thinking it could do something like this and then go up, so maybe into 137 and then reject fully. With that, we could see price do something like this, where price goes down and then goes up. So again, this could be the buying option, and you can also look at sell, because price is already, the distance between this here and here is quite a lot of pips anyway, so a few hundred there. Let me just double check. Yes, a good 200 pips like. But if we look at some sells to potentially then look at buys, if any of those two scenarios play off, like if we get some sells kicking in right now, it could end up taking this low into 131 and start selling off. Or if we start to see some momentum to the upside, like some bullish scenario, it could end up taking into 137. And then from here, if we start to see price rejecting, we could potentially, it really depends, obviously this is hindsight, but no, it's just kind of scenario based. But if we start to see more bullish pressure, then we'll continue holding this buy here. But if we start to reject with like a nice strong sell-off candle, it could give us influence to sell, you see. So again, it really depends what's going to happen if we get to these points. So do I think this is going to happen all in a week? No, it's probably going to be one direction at a time. So yeah, if you just give me 1 second, I'm just going to pause the video for a second. Sorry, I just needed to basically I got hay fever if you couldn't tell by my voice. But yeah, so pretty much looking at this scenario and the turning Y. So it really just depends what I'm going to be thinking and what kind of setups kind of form within this space. But ultimately, because I'm looking at EU, gold, AU, and NZD USD to all go higher, it kind of makes sense for UJ to drop. So essentially, dollar to get weaker. But the timing of that, I'm not necessarily sure. But again, this is the build up that I'm looking at. So if we take a look at CJ, so 20th, right? So what ended up happening here, quite interesting. We started to see more of a price rally to the upside, and I was looking out for basically a retracement possibly, and then a push higher. So what we saw here, price obviously came up, came back down, just a little bit up here. So probably wouldn't say that this was as accurate, but nonetheless we move forward and we can try and look at some newer scenarios. So we could potentially look at price dropping lower, but I'm quite interested in seeing if this momentum can withstand now. So there is a possibility that price could go higher, or we'll have some sort of drawdown, pullback. So we'll get something like this, like this, and then that move up, or we'll get price to do something like this, where we sell off. So again, it really depends what's gonna unfold. Just following the candles. So for now, I quite like this move to the upside, which makes this scenario probable. And again, this here doesn't have to happen. So we could have, a small pullback in here, and then allows you to buy. So I'll probably put, just to make that easier for next week when we look at the charts, something like this, just to show that we were looking at some potential buying opportunities there. Yeah. Okay, so if we look at EJ, so for EJ, where was it, 20th? Okay, so we had a very small pullback, but even there I wouldn't consider that as a pullback. Probably would have said, continue waiting for a pullback. So we got up to the upside here. So this second scenario, we start to see a little bit of sell-off here. So this could be playing out, so I'm going to be leaving that in there actually, but what I might do is just get rid of that drawing and annotation, and what we could look at is now for price to potentially make its way to the upside. So again, what you could do is do something like this. Oops. And then watch price go up again, like this. Just need to pause the video again, 1 second. So yeah, so they're the kind of two scenarios that I'm looking at, but ultimately we're waiting for this huge sell-off that's going to unfold. Not necessarily sure when, but that's the kind of flow that I'm going with the Japanese yen. So if we look at the last Japanese yen pair, so AJ, so if we take a look at here, 20th July, so was looking potentially at a sell-off, right? And what ended up unfolding, well, like a minor pullback, right? So we had something like this kind of unfold midweek, right? So if you look there, had price kind of pulled up and then it pulled back. So you could have looked at some sales, providing that that pullback was an option, or you knew that turning point or whatnot. So you could have grabbed a sell. But I'm ideally looking at something where price is turning over. So what I'm thinking is that this could be a scenario where we see price switching to the upside. So something like this, possibly. Okay. And this would give us the idea that price could still be pushing up, possibly into 97, 98 level. The other scenario is price taking into, well, seeing price take into lower levels, 92 possibly, or 91, and then having some sort of significant move. Again, we don't necessarily know until we see that confirmation with momentum. So again, a lot of waiting is needed. So if we just look at the last two US dollar pairs, so here I was actually expecting more of a deeper pullback, if I'm being truly honest. We did get a very small one compared to this huge drop. So again, not a problem. So pretty much end up here, but we still had the kind of correct bias, I guess, in the end. So looking forward for this week, or moving forward for this week rather, we could be looking out for pretty much a scenario where we get that bigger pullback and then we drop lower, and then we get this big spike up, so like so, or we get the, pretty much this could be the low, and then we get that kind of formation forming. So the buy would be there. You could also look at a sell here, providing that it's a good enough risk to reward ratio, of course, but this is obviously the big but, providing that we get that move. So excuse me. So yeah, providing that we get this sell-off and this spike, we could obviously get that sell-off, and if we get the momentum candles to show that it's rejecting, then we can look for sells. I wouldn't necessarily look for buys, because you're going to be looking to buy the bottom, and it's going to be like catching a falling knife. So I probably would avoid that. Probably wait for some kind of significant candle just to show you the ropes and where the direction is potentially going. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts with USD Chef. So finally, if we take a look into USDCAD, so very interesting with this, because where is it here? So I was actually thinking price could make one more move to the upside. So I still think that it is possible that we could get a move to the upside. So if that happens, then we could look at a buying opportunity, right? And that's the case, then we look something like this. I'm not saying that price is gonna, again, with all of these annotations, not saying price will go to the arrows. It's more just to kind of show you the directional flow, without showing that precision, if that makes sense, of my exact levels. Because obviously we don't know where these levels are going to turn, but it give you the idea with the arrows, which I hope you do know by now. But again, for anyone new, and then the other scenario is that, that's on the cards, is that we get some sort of pullback and then it just drops, which is all possible. And again, I think, like I said, tying this all back in, I do think that NFP could be the initiator of it, and there's obviously doesn't have to be NFP, but it could also be initiated by any news event. So this is all kind of all what I'm thinking so far for this week with all of the analysis pairs. Few pairs were kind of not necessarily accurate, but you know, the direction for most of them were actually pretty on point in my opinion. But yeah, like I said, if it does help, I hope it does obviously help. But yeah, if you did get any value from this video, and if it does help you, make sure to leave a like. If you haven't done so already, my friends, make sure you're subscribed, and we shall see you all next week.